Chapter 36. Clement of the Glen. Clement of the Glen was the nickname given to one of Robin's outlaws. He was a married man, but he had not seen his wife for a long time. There had been trouble in the village where he lived, and his only chance of escape had been to vanish into the forest to join Robin Hood and his band. "If only I could see my wife once again," he would say to himself sometimes when he was sitting alone in his forest home. "I should feel at peace." He was determined to seek out his wife again at the first opportunity. The chance, however, did not arise until he spoke about his troubles to Robin one day. "If opportunity does not come to you," advised Robin, "you must make the opportunity yourself." Clement of the Glen thought deeply about the advice that his master had given. He would make his own opportunity that very day. Off he set through the forest, along the Nottingham road, through the city, and to a village on the other side. He came at last to his cottage. His wife was happy indeed when she saw him coming along the road, and she ran to meet him. They linked arms and went into the house. "I've had to take in a lodger," she told him. "She is an old lady and seldom goes out, but she pays generously for a room, and I am able to live on the money she pays me." Clement of the Glen noticed the old lady sitting on a stool in the darkened kitchen, but he had thoughts only for his wife. The old lady was offended that this man should pass her by without even a greeting. She knew something of the circumstances that had sent Clement of the Glen away from his home to join Robin Hood's band. With a feeling of resentment at what she thought was a slight, she went from the cottage in search of one of the sheriff's men. "Clement of the Glen is back," she said when she met the sheriff's man along the road. "He's in the cottage now." The old lady may have regretted her hasty action later, but she acted under the urge of her resentment. She kept away from the cottage, for she knew that action would soon follow. In less than an hour a strong party of the sheriff's men bore down upon the cottage. Clement of the Glen was happily telling tales of his forest life to his wife. Suddenly he heard the sound of horses' hoofs along the road. He looked out of the doorway, then quickly darted back to where his wife was sitting. "The sheriff's men are here," he exclaimed. "We must not let them in." Together they placed furniture against the bolted door and awaited the coming of the riders. Clement stood ready behind the door with his longbow in his hand. His wife grasped a chopper, determined to do what damage she could to the attackers. The sheriff's men, unable to get in, tried to break down the door. Then through the splintered wood they saw the two brave figures, Clement and his wife, one poising a bow and arrow, the other holding a chopper. The sheriff's men were checked. They saw at once that whoever first approached would lose his life. They would have to think out a plan if they were to capture Clement of the Glen that day without casualties to themselves. "Burn the place down," cried the leader of the men suddenly. It was not long before flames began to leap along the front of the cottage. "The scoundrels!" cried Clement. He raced to the back of the cottage. Looking out of the window he found that the fire had not reached this part. "Come here," he cried to his wife. "Come quickly, jump out of the window, run for your life into the forest. I will join you later." Clement helped his wife to drop to the ground from the window. She begged him to hurry. He disappeared again into the room, where the smashed door was now alight. He could see through the flames that a large crowd had gathered. Angry fists were shaken at him. "Come out and take your punishment," sneered the leader of the sheriff's men. Clement's answer was to send a steady stream of arrows through the burning doorway. He kept this up until the intense heat from the flames forced him to throw down his bow. Snatching his sword from the hook on the wall, he dashed through the flaming doorway into the midst of the sheriff's men, waving the sword left and right. "Get him, men!" cried the leader. "Get him before he kills anyone else!" The suddenness of Clement's attack, however, made them all give before him. He dashed through the mob and ran along the road. His only chance of escape was down an alley that opened out from the street. He dashed into it, but the sheriff's men gave chase. Clement turned to face them, fighting savagely, slashing his sword to right and left in a last fierce bid for freedom. He went down fighting. The sheriff's men overwhelmed him. In a short time he was tied from head to foot and dragged back to the road where the leader of the men was standing. "Fling him into prison," ordered the leader. In his prison, Clement of the Glen knew that this was the end for him. It was comforting to know that his wife was free. As he lay on the rush-covered floor, he heard the continual tap-tap of the hammers outside his cell. They were building the scaffold. The sheriff did not waste much time. Meanwhile, a lad from the town had run into the forest directly he heard of Clement's capture. Clement had many times helped this lad, and now a chance had come to repay him. It was Robin Hood himself who first saw the lad in the forest. He hailed him. "It's Clement of the Glen, sir," said the lad. "He's been captured and is now in prison. They're going to hang him, sir." Robin was quick to act. He took Little John with him at once to Nottingham. Coming to the prison entrance, the two knocked on the door and waited. "What do you want?" demanded a surly voice. A man opened the door 4 or 5 inches to examine the visitors. Robin's fist crashed home on the man's jaw before he had finished the sentence. They were in. Little John snatched up the porter's keys as the two rushed to Clement's cell. "It's easy to tell which is Clement's cell," laughed Robin. "Hear the din he is making." In quick time Robin and Little John had opened Clement's cell and were set for freedom. But they suddenly saw the sheriff himself coming towards them. The 3 outlaws stopped in their tracks. "This is the opportunity I have been waiting for," sneered the sheriff. "You are trapped in my own prison too, which will save us much trouble." He leaned against the scaffold that had been erected during the night. Suddenly an arrow sang through the air. Robin had taken lightning aim. The arrow pierced the sheriff's coat and held him pinned to the scaffold. "Confound you!" he bellowed, struggling to free himself. "Help! Help!" His cries were soon answered, but not soon enough to catch the escaping outlaws. They sped on and were nearing the outskirts of Nottingham by the time the chase had really been organised. Bursting into the forest, they came upon a woman. She was weeping. Clement of the Glen recognised her at once. "She is my wife," he cried in delight. That day another member was added to Robin's band, for Clement's wife joined them in the forest and made her home there. She was made welcome by Maid Marian, and she soon learned to love the ways of the greenwood and the friendliness of its inhabitants. End of chapter 36.